Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Saturday night, the 2nd of February 2019, and it is Saturday Night Silver with Smaulgld. Got a couple of silver topics to go through, ultimately leading to the cross of gold. Now, why do we see a cross of gold when it's Saturday Night Silver? Well, we're going to answer that question, and we're going to go through a bit of history of silver. But first, I want to take a look at a little poll we did earlier today. Remember, you can see all the Smaulgld polls if you go over to the Smaulgld YouTube channel at the community section. Click on that tab. In fact, I'll give you that link right now so that you can vote in the polls that we have up tonight. The first poll is, which type of silver, if you buy physical silver, do you buy most of? Not some people buy a lot of different types of silver, but which is your go-to silver item? And I've given a list of silver choices, and I think it covers pretty much all of them. There's another tab for other, so there's something in there that you normally buy, you can put that in there as well. So here's the link. You can go over there and vote right now. I have the results up so far. They're somewhat interesting, but not too surprising. Let's take a look at those results right now. All right, you can go over there and look yourself, but I want to comment a bit on them. They are geared towards a third American Silver Eagles. It makes sense. And then privately minted silver rounds and bars. You put the two together, they're pretty much 2/3 of all silver demand. What prompted me to do this poll was, if you remember, I had James Henry Anderson of SD Bullion on the other day. We did an interview. That interview is up on Smaulgld YouTube channel. It's on the Smaulgld website. It's also on the Silver Doctor site as of today. And I asked him which are the most popular sale items at SD Bullion. It was interesting. On a dollar amount, he was able to tell me that silver, they actually sell as much dollar amount silver as they do gold, which means they sell 80 some odd times the ounces of silver than they do of gold. And that's quite fitting because they are called silver doctors, not gold doctors. And then I asked him what were the top products that they sell, and he's putting together a list of the top 10 products. He's actually doing a pretty high quality video that he shared, not with me, but I haven't seen the video, but he's explained to me the content of it, and we'll get that up when that comes out. And he said that the results of this poll we've done is pretty much in line with the SD Bullion buyers, but remember, these are Smaulgld game changer mug stacker preferences, and it seems to be American Silver Eagles 31%, privately minted rounds and bars, and that includes government minted bars. There are no government minted rounds, because if they were, they'd be called coins. Remember, a coin is something issued by a sovereign mint, but sovereign mints, some of them do issue bars, as do private companies. So the Sunshine Minting Company will issue a silver bar, but so does the Canadian Mint, and that was at 31%. Speaking of the Canadian Mint, the Maple Leaf coins are about 12%. Junk 90%, constitutional silver 14%. There's a good video, pretty much an intro video by Salivate Metal put up today on how to buy constitutional silver, 90% silver, junk silver. Take your choice. That was 14%. And then other, that would include Perth Mint, Austrian Mint, Mexican, Chinese Mint, and whatever other types of silver you may buy. All right. Now, if you're interested in buying gold or silver, you can do so through the Smaulgld site, and I'll give you the link. Smaulgld gets a small commission. It's not investment advice to buy gold or silver, but it does help the site out, and that's somehow how Smaulgld. We have no YouTube ads on here, no Google AdSense. So the only pumping I do here is for the mugs, for donations, and also through the affiliate links that you can buy gold or silver. And I give you a choice. You pay no more, no less than if you visited those links, those sites directly, and you can compare pricing and shipping and see what they've got in the way of Silver Eagles, privately minted rounds, junk silver, whatever you want to check out. And then also check out Golden Eagle Coin. They have some interesting privately minted rounds. Ones I like are these Litecoin and Bitcoin silver rounds. I think they're pretty interesting. But whatever you're interested in, you've got 3 bullion dealers, all good. You can select from there. And don't forget to go over to the link above to vote in the poll to see what type of silver you buy the most. And maybe some of you buy all of them, but there you go. Okay. Now, tonight's topic is the cross of gold. Gold versus silver and rich versus poor. That seems like a pretty hefty topic there, and it actually was. It was the topic of the day in the mid to late 19th century. This was a very big deal. Silver was at the heart, if you can imagine, of the political discussion. Just as like QE and the financial crisis was a big political issue. Well, silver was too. We're going to go through that. Now, I asked another question in the poll. You might wonder why I was asking that question, and we're going to see. The question was, you can vote in that poll as well, is silver sound money? That sounds like a stupid question, because when people talk about sound money, they talk about non-paper money. They talk about gold, silver, hard assets. And no surprise, out of 26 votes, 88% said yes, and 12% said no. But silver wasn't always sound money, as we're going to see. Now, you may think that's odd, but this discussion tonight is going to highlight my point that as times change, people's preferences for money change, even though you may have a blanket statement like, silver has been money for 5,000 years, period. Gold is money, period. We're going to see that even during those times, they came in and out of favor, and silver, as we're going to see, during the time period we were discussing, was actually cheap money. And we're going to finally conclude the discussion with some excerpts from the Cross of Gold speech by presidential candidate William Jennings Bryan in 1896. I'm going to read you some excerpts with some commentary to make it more up to date and understand what was going on. The politics of silver need to be explained in the context of the late 19th century. And in the mid to late 19th century, silver was really, really political. It was the cheap money, and the people wanted more of it. Now, contrast that to today. The cheap money, the people that wanted the QE were the bankers, right? Because they were credit driven. But back when you were on gold standards and silver standards, and gold and silver were money, period, and they weren't debt based, well, the bankers had that. It was the people that wanted the cheap money. The cheaper money was silver. That was the inflationary money. But in today's world, where gold and silver have been demonetized, it's the bankers that are in favor of the cheap money. Now, they claim that everyone benefits from cheap money, but we know that's not true, because who gets the cheap money? Well, we'll see. Back in the late 19th century, it was the poor, the laborer, the miner. They wanted the cheap money. We're going to see why in a minute. And who wants the cheap money today when it's paper? The rich. If it's inflationary and you can hand it out to your friends first, they get the benefit of it. And that's why you've seen in the last 10 years asset prices rising. Who benefits from rising asset prices? Well, who owns assets? Rich people, houses, and so on. Price of real estate goes higher. Stocks. Cheap money means that it's maybe inflationary, but if you get that money first and it drives the prices of your assets higher, you're happy. So it's kind of a reverse situation. And we're going to see how this battle in the late 19th century truly was between the bankers and the people, the North versus the South, the city versus the rural, the people with less means versus the moneyed interest. We're going to see issues of statism, nationalism. It's quite intriguing, and I'm going to try to give you an overview of what happened and the events that led up to this battle. But you'll see clearly that silver was, for a variety of reasons, the people's money. But you'll also find that the people sometimes are on a side that you might not agree with today. You may agree with some of, you may be rooting for the silver Democrats back then, partially because you may be partial to silver, but then you'll see some of their arguments you may find perhaps not to your liking. So let's get at brief history of the bimetallic standards that we had in the United States. And this prompted, because I had the honor of having a debate with David Morgan, it got me back into thinking of some of the history. We didn't cover this in the debate, but I can't leave this alone. I want to think more about the differences between gold and silver and the gold-silver ratio. And in 1792, the United States set the gold-silver ratio at 15 to 1. 1834, they raised it to 16 to 1. Now, here's an issue before, just to keep in mind as we go forward. Arbitrage is going to be an issue because there's always going to be differences in between the two prices, which means there's always going to be an opportunity to buy one, sell the other, and then take your proceeds and buy the other one, and back and forth. And that has a destabilizing effect. It's always easier to have one standard than two standards. Okay, so they call the Coinage Act of 1873 the crime of 1873. Now, that crime actually was set up earlier in 1853. Because gold and silver were interchangeably as money, the only thing that would make gold and silver a medium of exchange better would be to have it minted into coinage, to just basically change the format of the gold and silver metal and make it into U.S. coinage, and that makes it easier. Standard weights, it's got the number stamped on it. Now keep in mind, whenever you stamp a number on a coin, you're saying that that's the value of it. Now, back to arbitrage. What happens? Well, when silver is cheaper than the value that's stamped on it, what are people going to do? The miners, the producers are going to bring their silver in, and they're in effect going to make money. They're going to make the spread between the then price of silver and what they're going to stamp on the coin. And the reverse is going to be the case. If the value of silver is higher than the amount stamped on the coin, what are they going to do? They're going to hoard that silver. Now, another point to keep in mind is, maybe you never thought of this, but the United States has had 90% silver, we'll just stick to dimes, quarters, and half dollars, and for some period of time, dollar coins. And you say to yourself, well, that's kind of odd, isn't it? Because there must be different values during since 1792 to 1964 in the price of silver, meaning that at some point there was greater silver value in the coin and sometimes less than. And that's clearly the case. And again, that creates, even when you have just a silver standard or a gold standard, you have an issue of arbitrage because the metallic value at any given point can be worth more or less than the value of the coin. So if there's a certain amount of gold in the coin or a certain amount of silver in the coin, and that amount is less than the value, then the coin itself with the number stamped on it is worth more. And if the value of the metal in the coin is worth more than the number stamped on it, then that coin is worth less. It's very common. And so now when you have a bimetallic standard and you have the value of the metals, both of them fluctuating, you get some great opportunities for arbitrage, but also you create problems at the mint because you get less silver coming in or less gold coming in during certain times than others, and you can't keep the money supply or the minted money supply, because that's what matters. That's what's actually been turned into medium of exchange style coins rather than just how much gold or silver is out there. So what happened in 1853? This is quite fascinating because in 1849, what happened? That's a more common number that people might remember. Well, the gold rush of 1849. What did that do? Well, that created a flood of gold coming east, which in turn made the arbitrage on silver better, which made silver go higher in a sense that people wanted to have silver because, I wouldn't say silver is rarer than gold, but gold was plentiful. So, in 1853, by 1853, there was starting to become a shortage of silver coins. And it was expensive to mint the silver coins. Now, remember what I said about the coins? They always minted them. They always minted dimes, quarters, and half dollars. Well, little known to most people, a dime, quarter, and a half dollar from 1792 to 1853 was actually a larger coin. You might not be able to tell, but it is. What they did was similar to clipping the coin. They didn't reduce the silver content of the coin in 1853 due to the silver shortage. What they did instead was they made them smaller. Not imperceptibly smaller, but smaller. So, for example, I think I wrote the numbers down. So here they are. A dime went from 0.267 grams to 2.5 grams. Same composition, but just a smaller coin. And that was a decrease of about 6.3% of the amount of silver, being that the composition of the coin is the same, but it's a smaller coin. The same with the quarter. The quarter went from 6.75 grams in total weight to about 6.25, and that was a decrease of about 7.4. And the half dollar went from 13.36 grams to 12.44, and that also was a decrease, and that was about 6.88%. So they made the coin smaller. But that didn't last. So what happened in 1853, not only did they make the coin small, they had a couple of other things in the Coinage Act of 1853. They lowered the weight, got to lower the weight, got to lose the weight of the silver coins. And then they also, and this was kind of the setup, it was kind of a sneak preview of what they were going to do in 1873. They did not allow private depositors to have their silver bullion struck into dimes, quarters, and half dollars. Still could do the dollar, but they could, and also at the time they had half dimes, which is interesting. They weren't called nickels because they weren't made out of nickel. They were worth 5 cents, and they were made of silver. Kind of cool looking. But yeah, you couldn't have them struck into the smaller amount. So that's kind of a setup or a precursor of what they were going to do in 1873. So now you have the gold rush impacting the arbitrage on the gold and silver. Remember, they're both money. And 1853, they have to act and actually make the silver coins smaller. 1859 comes along, and this changes. This is a game changer. 1859. Anyone know what happened in 1859? Well, the Comstock lode in Nevada struck, and it is massive, and there is silver in abundance, and there's a silver rush now. Forget 1849, 1859. It is huge, game changer. Silver's there, it's cheap, and you can go there, and people are out there mining it. And Nevada, in a way, became from like 1859 to almost into the 1930s, almost like South Africa and Saudi Arabia in geopolitical significance, because it was the place where there was just silver. It was the silver state. And we'll see how Nevada acts. We're not going to cover it in detail today, but I've done other silver YouTubes on this, how the Pittman Act actually created an environment for, the guy's name was Pittman because he came from Nevada. He was a senator from Nevada. It created an opportunity for silver miners to mine silver, and that was because England needed to get silver from the United States, so the U.S. agreed to melt down the Morgan silver dollars that had been, get this, authorized in 1878 after silver had been demonetized, and a lot of people were pretty pissed off, to mint silver dollars. So that got the Nevada mints going in 1878. But then in 1918, they agreed to melt those down in order to create another opportunity to mint them again. Because the deal was England came to the U.S., said we have a silver shortage in India, we need silver. The United States says we have silver. We just minted all these coins in 1878 and been minting them like mad up until 1904. And yeah, we'll mint them down. We'll send them to you. And then they agreed with Nevada to remint the coins and replace all the ones that they sold to England. And then again in 1934, Pittman was involved in the Silver Act of 1934, when again there was a shortage, and Nevada came to the rescue, and then the United States was going around the world and buying up a lot of silver. So you can see Nevada has a political interest in the silver mines, and that Comstock load literally put them on the map, was a game changer. I got a little ahead of myself about 1873, so let's just back up and go 1853, the Coinage Act of, or the Coinage Act of 1853, due to a bit of a silver shortage, lowered the silver content in the dimes, quarters, and half dollars, and then also forbade the depositors from getting their silver struck into half dimes, dimes, quarters, half dollars, and so on. That was a feature back then because there really was no difference between having silver and money other than you wanted it to be in the form that was struck by the U.S. government. That gave it the standard. But again, we mentioned there's that arbitrage where people wouldn't bring silver to the mint as they did when silver was more expensive during the gold rush times, and then that led to the 1853 Coinage Act, where they lowered the size of the dimes, quarters, and half dollars. And as we mentioned, 1859 comes along, Comstock load, game changer in Nevada. All right, 1873 comes along. By now, it's apparent silver is abundant. You know, you have these natural ratios. Well, remember, natural ratios are, I would say, they're not static. It depends on new finds. It depends on demand. But back then, what happened was then silver became plentiful. And therefore, the more plentiful metal in a system where metal is money becomes the inflationary metal. Because if it can just be brought out of the ground, dragged into the mint without any indication of what the price is going to be on it. So for example, if as they kept finding more and more silver, they could still get it banged into a dollar coin. They'd already in 1853 said they can't make half dimes, dimes, quarters, and half dollars for you anymore, but you could still get it made into $1 coins, even though the price of silver would be going down because they're being finding more and more of it. But still, you can mint it and bring it into the mint and get $1 for it, even though it might be worth much less than that. So in 1873, they stopped making U.S. silver dollars, and they stopped allowing people and miners and to bring in their silver specie to make coinage. Now, they did make dollars those years. They're called trade dollars. They were not for circulation in the United States, the U.S. trade dollars. Should have gotten some pictures of these, but they were just to use in like pieces of 8 in commerce overseas in Asia. As I mentioned, after 1873, there were a lot of people that were annoyed, so they passed the Bland-Allison Act, which provided for the minting of dollar coins. Not that you can bring your silver in and get them, but the mint would mint them for circulation in the United States. Now, here is a description from the U.S. Mint. I like this one. Kind of describes my arbitrage discussion earlier. It says, when silver was priced high, the mint saw less action in terms of coinage. Why? Because the silver was being hoarded because it was seen as valuable. When silver was abundant, supply was high, i.e., its value fell, demand was low. This endangered gold is a person could use silver to buy gold, then sell that gold, most likely abroad, and use the profits from the gold sale to buy an even greater amount of silver back in the United States. The gold then became hoarded as a result. So you see this bimetallic standard caused this arbitrage, which is not, it might have been good for people engaged in that because it's kind of free money, but it screws up the ability to plan your minting activities and then making sure that the people have specie that they can transact with. And there's been times in the US when there's been shortages of coins. If you look in the 20s, because of that Pittman Act, when they melted down all of the gold dollars to ship to England, well then, yes, they had to reproduce all those silver coins in 1921, 1922, and so on to replace the ones that they melted down. The problem was all the silver, even though they were on full time trying to produce a lot of silver, it all had to go towards replacing those silver dollars, and they didn't have enough silver for the smaller denominated coins. And that is why you'll see, anyone who looks at junk silver, why the 1920s American Liberty, the Mercury dimes and the Liberty walking $half are so worn out. It's not because they're that much older. It's because they had to stay in circulation longer because they didn't mint many of them. And then you'll notice after 1934, when they had the Silver Purchase Act of 1934, you'll start to see massive amounts of dimes, quarters, and $half being minted again, and they're again less rare. That's why the 1921 dime is worth so much, because they didn't make that many of them, and during that decade in the 20s, they weren't making a lot of silver coins because they didn't have the silver, because it was all going towards replacing the massive amount, I don't have the number off the top of my head, of silver dollars they had melted down to send to England. So you could see how this thing goes back and forth. Now, let's get back to the crime of 1873. This effectively piggybacked off of the Coinage Act of 1853, but went one step further and said finally you cannot turn your silver in to make silver dollars, which meant silver is not money, period. Silver is no longer a in and of itself, it's not. Not that you can't make, not that they stopped minting coins, and as we saw after 1873, they still minted silver coins. In fact, they minted them up to 1964, but they were saying that it was not money in and of itself. It would only be money if they minted it, and they just used that to mint it into coins. So this moved the U.S. onto pretty much what they call a gold standard, which means it wasn't going to buy that silver and then, you know, at a price and then convert it into those silver coins. And this was happening throughout the world. Germany had stopped the silver thaler, I think, around 1875. And a lot of people didn't even realize this was happening. So the Coinage Act passed, and that's why they call it the crime of 1873, was once the miners started brought the bullion in, they weren't going to ask for half dimes, dimes, quarters, and 50-cent pieces. They realized they could not get the value of their silver. And they were like, oh, holy, that's not good. So now they were counting on, I mean, they wanted to cash in. I mean, you really were going to cash in by bringing your silver there, especially if it's just coming out of people's ears out of Nevada. But they were expecting to be able to get paid for that. And because they said you can no longer do this, well, that caused the price of silver to go down. Why? Because it's not money anymore. It's back to being a commodity. There's no demand for it as a monetary metal because the government says we're not going to give you monetary value for it. So now you got a lot of silver coming in and being mined. That's the excess supply, and then demand is just shot. It's not going to be given the value. It's not going to be minted into dollars. It's not going to be minted. Already since 1853 wasn't being minted into half dimes, dimes, quarters, and $half. Now, this makes the people, obviously, the mining interests, which were much more significant than they are today, they're against the moneyed interest, the people in the East. These are the people out West. This is what started, as we're going to see in William Jennings Bryan's speech, the divide. This was a division similar to what we have today. You had the Northeast and California and people out West, where the moneyed interests, and then the rest of the country, the rural, the less affluent, they were the miners. They were against the moneyed interest, and they wanted the silver to flow freely, the so-called free silver. You could bring your silver in and it could be minted into money. And of course, if you were a rich person, you did not want that inflationary money coming into the system and doing what? Reducing the value of your money. See, in this case, because you're both on solid grounds, what you would call sound money, if you are rich, you want the sounder money. You don't want the less expensive money, so it created this divide. And they tried to assuage the people who wanted the inflation by allowing the Bland-Allison Act, and as I mentioned, to start minting silver dollars again. But it wasn't the same thing as being able to bring your silver in and get value for it. Now, if you think about what that means, if you can bring your silver to the government and have them minted into coinage, that's almost like cash for clunkers. I know it sounds odd, but if it's not worth $1, why should they give you $1 for it? And we're going to see in Bryan's speech what he says about that, because he actually believes, and this is where you guys might not agree, that that's the government's role, is to help the people. In other words, government policies are supposed to enrich the masses, not the wealthy. So yeah, if you want to go out and mine silver and it's worth 14 cents, we'll give you $1 for it. I mean, that was pretty much what they wanted to do. All right. So, because there was an increase in the production of silver, and then there was a decline in demand due to the demonetization of silver, that clearly made silver the cheaper metal. And that has lessons for today. That's my point, why the gold-silver ratio is high. Both metals have been demonetized to a certain extent, but silver's been totally demonetized. And even on the investment side, the investment demand for silver, as we've mentioned the other day, only makes up 10 to 15% of overall demand, whereas for gold, it still makes up a decent amount, and central banks hold it, so it's part of the financial system. That's why the gold-silver ratio is higher, because they're no longer both acting as money. When they were both acting as money, it somewhat made sense to have them at a relative ratio of 15:1 to 16:1, when one is half money or part money still, and the other one's not money at all. Well, that's why you have the divergence. A lot of people insist that they're still money. They have money characteristics. But in the day-to-day exchange, if you don't use them as medium of exchange, they don't have a monetary component, and that's why you buy silver. You buy it as an investment. It's not part of the monetary system. All right, so let's get now into this festering wound that's going on in the United States, because there's now a big divide in the country between the moneyed Northeast and the rural rest of the country. So William Jennings Bryan was the Democratic nominee in 1896. From what I understand, he wasn't even supposed to be. But he gave this speech, which I'm going to try to reproduce parts of and give you a commentary on what he's talking about, was supposedly such a barn burner that women wept and men threw their hats in the air, and he became the nominee. And he almost won against McKinley, but he lost. So let me give you the speech. So he starts off, and what I've done is I've broken the speech down. I put headings on it. And so I'll give you the heading Then I'll read you the portion of the speech and you'll be able to make sense of it. The cause. He says, I come to you to speak in defense of a cause as holy as the cause of liberty, the cause of humanity. He's talking about silver here. Never before in the history of this country has there been witnessed such a contest as that through which we have passed. Never before in the history of American politics has a great issue been fought out as this issue has been by the voters themselves. So this is a huge cause, and silver is at the center of it. Then he talks about the silver Democrats. On the 4th of March, 1895, a few Democrats, most of the members of Congress, issued an address to the Democrats of the nation asserting that the money question was the paramount issue of the hour, asserting also the right of a majority of the Democratic Party to control the position of the party on this paramount issue, concluding with the request that all believers in free coinage of silver in the Democratic Party should organize and take charge of and control the policy of the Democratic Party. These are the free silver Democrats going to take control of the Democratic Party. 3 months later at Memphis, an organization was perfected, and the silver Democrats went forth openly and boldly and courageously proclaiming their belief and declaring that if successful, they would crystallize in a platform the declaration which they had made. And then began the conflict, with a zeal approaching the zeal which inspired the crusaders who followed Peter the Hermit. This is a very emotional pitch for the silver Democrats. Our silver Democrats, he went on, went forth from victory unto victory, until they are assembled now, not to discuss, not to debate, but to enter up the judgment rendered by plain people of this country. So the silver Democrats took over the party, and it's on this issue of free coinage of silver, and that's what the people of this country want. Then he draws the divide, country versus city elite. And he says this to his adversaries. When you come before us and tell us that we shall disturb your business interests, we reply that you have disturbed our business interests by your action. We say to you that you have made too limited in its application the definition of a businessman. The man who is employed for wages is just as much a businessman as his employer. The attorney in a country town is just as much a businessman as the corporation counsel in a great metropolis. The merchant at the crossroads store is as much a businessman as the merchant of New York. The farmer who goes forth in the morning and toils all day, begins in the spring and toils all summer, and by the application of brain and muscle to the natural resources of this country creates wealth, is as much a businessman as the man who goes upon the board of trade and bets upon the price of grain. The miners who go 1,000 feet into the earth or climb 2,000 feet upon the cliffs and bring forth from their hiding places the precious metals to be poured into the channels of trade are as much businessmen as the few financial magnates who in a backroom corner the money of the world. So you see the divide he's creating. The working class versus the rich oligarchs. The ones back east. The coastal elites as we have today. He goes on, we come to speak for this broader class of businessmen. What he's doing is he's characterizing his constituents as much businessmen as these so-called elites. Ah, my friends, we say not one word against those who live upon the Atlantic coast. But those hardy pioneers who braved all the dangers of the wilderness, who have made the desert to blossom as the rose, these pioneers away out there rearing their children near to nature's heart, where they can mingle their voices with the voices of the birds, out there where they have erected schoolhouses for the education of their children, and churches where they praise their Creator, and cemeteries where sleep the ashes of their dead, are as deserving of the consideration of this party as any people in this country. It is for these that we speak. We do not come as aggressors. Our war is not a war of conquest. We are fighting in defense of our homes, our families, and posterity. We have petitioned, and our petitions have been scorned. He sounds just like the Declaration of Independence. Those are similar words that Jefferson used about why the king was ignoring their grievances. We have entreated, and our entreaties have been disregarded. We have begged, and they have mocked when our calamity came. We beg no longer. We entreat no more. We petition no more. We defy them. And the crowd is going bonkers over this. And it's about silver. But now here's Jennings Bryan as a statist. This is what he says about the income tax. The income tax is a just law. It simply intends to put the burden of government justly upon the backs of the people. I'm in favor of an income tax. When I find a man who is not willing to pay his, quote, fair share of the burden of government which protects him, I find him a man who is unworthy to enjoy the blessings of a government like ours. I mean, that could have been, when I find a man who is not willing to pay his fair share of the burden of government which protects him, I find a man who is unworthy to enjoy the blessings of a government like ours. This could be Dizzy Miss Lizzie. This could be Ocasio-Cortez. But, like, go on. He says, we say in our platform that we believe that the right to coin money and issue money is a function of government. We believe it is part of sovereignty and can no more with safety be delegated to private individuals than can the power to make penal statutes or levy laws for taxation. What he's saying here is that the government has the right to coin money. Now keep that in mind, not the banks. This is pre-Federal Reserve. He's saying that the government should be your pal, and you should be able to bring your silver to the government, and they should issue you money. You don't want any of this privately minted coin nonsense, privately minted bars and rounds, silver shield stuff. We want the government stuff. We want to bring our free silver to the government, and we want them to mint it into coins for us. And they're the ones who are best suited to do this. Then he goes on against the banks. Mr. Jefferson, tell he likes Thomas Jefferson, who was once regarded as a good democratic authority, seems to have a different opinion from the gentleman who has addressed us on the part of the minority. Those who are opposed to this proposition tell us that the issue of paper money is a function of the bank, and that the government ought to go out of the banking business. I stand with Jefferson rather than with them. I tell them, as he did, that the issue of money is a function of the government, and that banks should go out of the governing business. Then he draws a distinction, Democrats versus Republicans. Why is it that within 3 months such a change has come over the sentiments of the country? 3 months ago, when it was confidently asserted that those who believed in the gold standard would frame our platforms and nominate our candidates, even the advocates of the gold standard did not think we could elect a president. But they had good reasons for this suspicion, because there is scarcely a stake here today asking for the gold standard that is not within absolute control of the Republican Party. Then he paints McKinley as a tool of international bankers. Listen to this. But note the change. Mr. McKinley was nominated at St. Louis upon a platform that declared for the maintenance of the gold standard until it should be changed into bimetallism by international agreement. Why this change? Ah, my friends, is not the change evident to anyone who will look at the matter? It is because no private character, however pure, no personal popularity, however great, can protect from the avenging wrath of an indignant people the man who will either declare that he is in favor of fastening the gold standard upon his people, or who is willing to surrender the rights of self-government and place legislative control in the hands of foreign potentates and powers. So he's saying that because the international bankers want the gold standard, that's why McKinley wants it. And he's defying his own people. He's painting him as a traitor, it sounds like. Then, silver for the people. Here is the line of battle. We care not upon which issue they force the fight. More than that, we can tell them this, that they will search the pages in history in vain to find a single instance in which the common people of any land ever declared themselves in favor of a gold standard. They can find where holders of fixed investments have. Mr. Carlyle said in 1878 that this was a struggle between the idle holders of idle capital and the struggling masses who produce the wealth and pay the taxes of the country. And my friends, it is simply a question that We shall decide upon which side the Democratic Party shall fight. Upon the side of idle holders of idle capital, or upon the side of the struggling masses? That is the question that the party must answer first, and then it must be answered by each individual hereafter. The sympathies of the Democratic Party, as described by the platform, are on the side of the struggling masses, who have ever been the foundation of the Democratic Party. Again, you can see that populism rising in the Democratic Party for the people. Now he talks about common terms we talk about today in trickle-down or government assistance. The rich want the trickle-down economy, and the Democrats want this government welfare style, which in a sense, as I called the free coinage in a way, cash for clunkers. He continues, there are two ideas of government. There are those who believe that if you just legislate to make the well-to-do prosperous, that their prosperity will leak through on those below. The Democratic idea has been that if you legislate to make the masses prosperous, their prosperity will find its way up and through every class that rests upon it. Now here's where he draws the city versus rural. Very nice imagery here. You come to us and tell us that the great cities are in favor of the gold standard. I tell you that the great cities rest upon these broad and fertile prairies. Burn down your cities and leave our farms, and your cities will spring up again as if by magic. But destroy our farms, and the grass will grow in the streets of every city in this country. My friends, we shall declare that this nation is able to legislate for its own people on every question without waiting for the aid or consent of any nation on earth, and upon that issue we expect to carry every single state in the Union. Again, saying this is nationalism here. The government is created for the benefit of its people, and that government should help its people, should not be tying into these international gold standard alliances. He goes further on the nationalist thread here. And then he concludes with his famous quote. Shall we, their descendants, he's talking about the descendants of the founding fathers, when we have grown to 70 million, declare that we are less independent than our forefathers were? No, my friends, no, it will never be the judgment of this people. Therefore, we care not upon what line the battle is fought. If they say bimetallism is good, but we cannot have it till some nation helps us, we reply that instead of having a gold standard because England has, we shall restore bimetallism. And then let England have bimetallism because the United States has it. If they dare to come out in the open field and defend the gold standard as a good thing, we shall fight them to the uttermost, having behind us the producing masses of the nation and the world. Having behind us the commercial interests and the laboring interests and the toiling masses, we shall answer their demands for a gold standard by saying to them, you shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold. And the crowd went bonkers. All that over silver, a pretty emotional topic. It came down to silver being the money of the people. Why? Because it was cheap, and it was going to help them inflate away their debts, and it was going to strike a nail in the coffin of the richer people because their wealth was going to, their holdings were going to be whittled away by inflation. All right, let's see what you guys have been saying and thinking over here in the comments. Zipper Fixer says, you were great at the debate. I saw it today. Well, thank you. Let's see what else we got here in the comments. Prashanti Girl is here. Roger Hendley is here. Scott Vardell asked, do you really fix zippers? Not easy work. My dad did it. Roger says, I think small gold silver rounds would outsell the road to rooter rounds. I'm still trying to find somebody who will make me the rounds. But I would love to make the Smaulgld game changer silver rounds. Cole Divine, I'm more interested in what precious metal central bank store. Well, that's obvious. They store gold. Partisan Gorilla, why them central banks hold them relics is what I want to know. Well, we know why they hold gold. It has never left the monetary system. Even after Bretton Woods, central banks have continued to hold gold, and they've just recently started adding, mostly it's Russia and Kazakhstan, where you're seeing a few other banks starting to add gold. That's the point. Gold still has, okay, monetary value because central banks hold it. Now, here's a very important point that I just thought of. You say, yeah, but that's because the government has kicked silver out. That's because governments have decided that gold is the metal. That is true. And the people wanted silver. Okay, that's true too. But what William Jennings Bryan was saying, though, was not, hey, let's everybody just trade our silver because silver is the money of the people. That's not what they wanted. They wanted a government handout. They wanted the government to take the cheaper money and give it value. There's a big, big difference there. That populism isn't because they wanted to trade silver amongst themselves and they didn't want the bankers telling them what to do. No, they wanted the government to help them and give their silver more value. That's a very, very important point, because what Bryant wanted to do wasn't to create a system away from the bankers. He wanted to create a system where the government, the treasury, was acting on behalf of the people by giving value to the silver. So it's not as simple as we don't have to work with the government, we can just trade our silver on our own. No, they couldn't, because it wasn't worth that much. They wanted the government to give it more value. They wanted the government to go back to saying, we'll give you more than fair value for the silver. There is a dude that just jumps his silver in a big pile in the middle of the room. I want to be that dude. Yeah. Hey, Tom is here. Presentee's girl is gone. Scott Wardell, you stole my idea from last night's debate, what you left out. You came over-prepared, must have driven you crazy. Don't know what that means, but okay. Roger wants a Jerry Springer debate. Tom Manley, I watched a video recently. In this video, a guy stated that silver is going to be worth more than gold. I'm a game changer. If you know the history, the only way that happens is if there is a sudden demand for silver over gold. And one of the biggest demands would be somehow silver was remonetized and gold wasn't. Well, that's never going to happen. That's not going to happen. The best chance for silver to ever be worth more than gold would be for there to be a massive increase in some type of commodity demand for silver, coupled with some type of investment demand. But there really hasn't been any of that type of significant change, and that's why you've seen, since they demonetized silver, the gold-silver ratio isn't 16 to 1. Last 100 years, it's been averaging 50 some odd. Since Bretton Woods, since they got rid of the gold standard, gold actually went higher because gold had been fixed at $35 an ounce in order to have a gold standard. When they got rid of the gold standard, then gold was allowed a free float, and gold went higher, partially because it was still considered an investable metal, where silver wasn't, and then gold took off from silver. And only in 1980 did it get down to 16 to 1, and only in 2011 did it get to 30 to 1. But most of the time, since the end of Bretton Woods in 1971, or since they allowed Americans to own gold at the end of 1974, the gold-silver ratio has averaged well over 50. And I'm not surprised by that. Roger says, Lewis, I watched a movie the other night called Silver Bears. Michael Caine. Oh, that's interesting. Partisan Gorilla. I wish there were figures on how much military consumes of silver. I've looked into that, and I had the numbers for how much goes into intercontinental ballistic missiles, Tomahawk missiles. It's not really that much. There's like a few monster boxes in each missile. It's not like hundreds of millions of ounces of silver. So anyone who tells you that silver is going to skyrocket because of yoga pants or military, it's very little. It's the big demands for silver currently. The big ticket items are silverware, jewelry, solar panels, electronics. Those are the big ones. and then coins, rounds, and bars, and then everything after that is little minor piddling stuff. It's not a lot. Bitcoin Cash. Let's see. KZ Gixer. Would you support an electronic treasury coin issued by the Treasury Department? No. Make a game changer cup. Andrew still wants that game changer mug. Yeah, I will. Well, Ann, you missed a big history lesson, so you have to go back. We even talked about a game changer that happened in 1849 and 1859. Walter Gunn, what's wrong with silver sheen rounds? Nothing. Smaulgld, it's the only silver out there that has the best returns in this bear market so far, period. All right. I don't know who said anything was wrong with silver shield rounds. How can some silver have better returns? Because the silver shield rounds have a limited mintage, and to some people, that gives them additional value. Remember, limited edition, relative rarity in itself doesn't create value. But if people want the silver shield rounds, and there's, let's say, 100 of them, and there's buyers for 200 of them, well, then supply demand. That's why they've gone up. They've gone up because there's a metallic value that keeps whatever value that is, the 18, 17, whatever it is per ounce. There is a manufacturing premium because you have it in an ounce size as opposed to just a lump of raw silver. And then you have a design value coupled with a limited edition. So that's how the silver shield manages to retain its, or get a premium. All right. Sell a buffalo round and a silver shield round, tell you which gives you a better profit. Yes, that's true with one or two, but if you wanted to invest, let's say $500,000 in silver, you probably couldn't buy $500,000 worth of silver shield. You see how that works? The buffalo round, you're right, is more commoditized. So one round of buffalo round is you're gonna get spot or less than spot. A silver shield you may be able to get a few dollars, $10, whatever it is, whatever they go for. But the problem is you can't buy that many of them by definition. So the reason that they're rare is because they're not really bullion. They are semi-numismatic. All right. A round can have numismatic value. They can, but in general they don't. I think the silver shield is actually a somewhat of an anomaly in that there manages to be a, how do you put it, a market. There's a market. It's small in size, but it's large enough to support the supply of the market. So what Chris does is he feeds the market with the right amount to create the interest, which creates the demand, and then he limits the supply. All right. Joe asks, wouldn't it have solved the problem of arbitrage if we had gone of having money, goods, services, and tax priced by weight of metal? Yeah. Well, the way they solved it, Joe, was by, we're not going to get into it tonight, was by just taking all the metallic value out of the coins and just stamping the money on it, and then they would just issue paper or coins with numbers printed on them. There was no arbitrage value in that whatsoever, but there was clearly an inflationary value. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and whomever else, I want to thank you for joining me today. So we'll be back again tomorrow night. Please remember to like, subscribe, and go over to smaulgld.com. Check out the site there. Check out the affiliate links. And don't forget, you can always donate via Bitcoin, Litecoin, PayPal, Patreon, or you can send small amounts of precious metal or checks to Smaulgld LLC, P.O. Box 714, Dover, New Hampshire, 03821. Thank you very much for listening.